Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us to A New Life, a series of educational talks with the Rav Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hello, Nitza Mazos. And we're talking here with the Rav Laitman recently about the Israeli society searching for a new way, for a new life, a new social code according to which we'll be able to live here and to live well, so that we'd be able to leave this pressureful and stressful lives that we're living here and to begin a new life. The Rav Laitman illustrated a vision for us, for the Israeli society, that we all need to live as one family. In actuality, and since he's illustrated this vision for us, we were trying to feel it, to taste it, to understand it, so that we'd be able to begin and actualize it and take it from the studio to society. So for that, we're going to take a trip today. We started with it in the last discussion. We'd like to continue on this journey. We'd like it very much, and Nitza is our guide, and she will lead us through this trip. So this is a trip after our roots to the great soul of Israel, to this place that we miss so much within ourselves. We feel that it's missing, this connection to ourselves, to our spirit. It's something that really is not there. And we'd like to go out together with you and to come to our next destination, our next station. And I can tell you that as one who was used to going on trips, and I'm used to reading all kinds of materials as preparation for the trip. And also I've seen and discovered that historically this period is very varied. There are a lot of interpretations and angles through which people view this period. And the way that you see it is different. It opens new angles that I feel that everything that you experience together with us on this journey is something that can really take finally to the society that we see today, that is very relevant to our times, something that can really help us bring back the pride and use this process today in the Israeli society today. So before we were with Abraham in Babylonia and Mesopotamia, we learned about Abraham's method. And what is the next station that you're taking us to? Well, according to Oren's request, we need to already talk about our situation today. No, we want to learn about where we should go today out of this journey into the past. We want to discover our true historical root, a social root, so that we'll be able to learn from our past to build our society today. So we'd like to jump to a frame from the past and to look at it not from an historical perspective or a biblical perspective, but through the glasses of relationships between people, to learn how the Israeli society lived before, so that we'll be able to understand what we need to create here and now in order to bring a new spirit, a new hope, to create a place that I'll be proud to live in, to feel safe about having children here. I think these are the vibes. So if we want to take this trip, where do you think we should travel to today in order to illustrate a social dynamics, socially from the more ancient times, so that we could learn from today? Maybe if we follow the historical chronological timeline, it will be easier for us to follow you. I don't really know if we can follow this chronological timeline to study from, if we can study a lot from it, because these are changes that happen to us and also to the world. To us, meaning to the group of Abraham and to all of the world. And today, we are discovering once again that we are in Babylon, that we are all tied together around the earth. All of Babylon is the entire globe. We've reached it in our egoistic development, just like the Babylonian society that dispersed all over the earth and covered the earth. And today we find ourselves in a similar and yet different state from this situation. First of all, then, they had a vision. They wanted to develop, they wanted to follow their inner impulses of nature? Why shouldn't we realize what's inside us, our potential? Why not? And therefore, they rightly said to Abraham, well, you're saying that we should stay here and connect, and not to become distant from one another and not to use each other. We need to build a society that is cooperative, that is as one family, just like we had before. But it's not like before. We now have this big ego. This is what they told him in Babylon. How can we with this hatred? Why should we? Let's just create distances between us and live peacefully and well. And therefore, Abraham didn't have with what to convince them. But he gave them all kinds of presents for the path, which is called religions and faiths. And what is that? To a certain extent, they sweetened their life. And what did they say? They said, love thy friend as thyself. Don't do to others what you hate. We should unite. We should connect. We should somehow be connected. Well, people, we are people. We're not animals, and so on. He gave them the same method that he gave to his group, except it was inside the ego. It was something that was worthwhile for the egoists to be united a little bit, to build this common society, this cooperative society where the systems would be balanced, for there to be justice, law, reward and punishment. It would be easier for them to cope in this world. And also they told them that in the next world a person would die and would have a reward, just like all the religions that we see and the way they organize our lives. This was his approach towards all the Babylonians. That the part that wanted to connect to him, that wanted to realize it in a very exact way inside the family, not by dispersing, but by uniting, these people connected to Abraham and built this concept that is called Israel. And later, this group, over the thousands of years of development, it couldn't maintain this connection, and all kinds of wars began between the conflicts between the Tzdokim and Pulshim, and then there was a temple, and later they entered Israel after Egypt, and then they began with the egoism. There were the forces of Rome and Greece and so on. And later, in the years of exile, they were integrated by all those nations that they encountered in exile. And so the picture that we have today is that we see a world that is interconnected, just like in Babylon, in a mutual way that we only reveal and discover each and every day. How much we cannot be disconnected from one another. How much we can influence one another in the ways we're connected. Nobody can be disconnected from the others. We all depend on each other. So this same form as we had in Babylon of this network between us is beginning to be revealed between us in a way that is very compelling on the one hand. And on the other hand, there isn't this same direction of using the ego in all kinds of forms and directions that they had back then. They had all kinds of opportunities then. Lately, we've begun to understand that if we continue in this way, we'll destroy ourselves. There is no more resources on earth. we are losing the power to constantly develop the egoistic society. I still want to have a family, but not like before. We see, according to the divorce rates, I don't want to lead the world so much. I don't want to rule it so much. We see how many people are depressed, how many people use drugs and lose their will to live this egoistic life. We see how much, despite all this technology and all these possibilities, people are tired of all this development that's happened to us. We are in crisis. We see that our egoism, if we run our lives according to our nature, our egoistic nature, we reach a state where everybody suffers. Even those who have everything, they commit suicide even more, and they suffer and are despaired even more than those who lack material well-being. So there are all kinds of strange phenomena here that our ego is showing us, according to what we see today, that it doesn't bring us happiness, to none of us. And this crisis is experienced more in the way a person relates to his life, to himself. He feels that he's empty. This question of why am I alive, it awakens within him more than ever before. This question that people who united around Abraham had, this question now is found in millions, in the masses. And when we're talking not about the entire world, but about the people of Israel, then in the people of Israel we have phenomena just like in the entire world. But we need to not forget that at its foundation, at its basis, in its genes, in its DNA, there are those same phenomena that they had before, because they attained connection, they attained this special success in this unity of feeling the essence of life. Life on a higher level of our ego. What we call spiritual life. Spirit means above the ego, in bestowal, in mutuality, in love. And they began to attain this force of connection, this force of bestowal. And they felt in this power that a new and different approach to life opened up for them. Therefore, today, we see that we just need to renew it. We need to begin from unity, and we see that when it comes to unity, we're in an even worse state than everybody else. We're dependent on everyone. Our security, our economy, our human society here in Israel, and so on and so forth. We find ourselves in a situation that is threatened more than any other nation in the world. And still, we have an opportunity to reach this new society, just like we did before. And this is what we need to advertise to the entire nation. However, there also needs to be a very soft approach here in understanding what is it exactly that's missing for the people. First of all, they need security, then education, family, equality, and so on and so forth. And in accordance to that, we are the people. We miss all these things that you mentioned, and I can add to your list quite a lot of things. Yes, so we need to show that nothing will be fulfilled unless we unite with mutual responsibility and unity between us. This is, in general, the approach. This is the study that we need to study this. We need to learn this, to teach ourselves. Maybe you should ask. The reason that we've taken this trip to this journey is because we thought that if we go step by step and see the process that this Israeli society has gone through from the beginning, from the time that it was founded to the times that we find ourselves in today, station by station, it's possible that we'll be able to understand something about ourselves. This is why we wanted to go on this trip. So you were at this first station where everything started. This is where the method of Abraham was founded. This is where we all began. Now, the next stage, and this is the next station that you need to take us through, is a station that we need to learn something from. They managed to unite. We'll skip all the processes they went through because it's not relevant to our days. With us, it will exist it will happen in a different way, but they managed to live as one homogeneous society, relatively speaking. And these were really very good and nice days that Israel had when they were united. Because the force of bestowal is above the force of reception in nature, because the force of reception controls the inanimate, vegetative, and animal levels, and the force of bestowal rules the speaking level, and it's higher, more powerful, more qualitative. Therefore, if we live on the height of the force of bestowal, with the force of reception only joining it and subsiding within it, then we reach a state where no one harms the other, and also no neighbor, no other nation of the world does not harm us, because we are on a higher level than all of them. It's just like the vegetative level controls the inanimate, and the animate level controls or rules the vegetative level. And if we reach the speaking level, the human level, where we are ruled by the force of bestowal, then it's supposedly we rule the entire world. Our rule is not through force, but by being able to bestow to the entire world and show them in this good, nice way that we don't rule with the force of bestowal like the force of reception does with pressure, but by showing and giving an example to the entire world. What Abraham was not able to give to the Babylonians, he had to separate his group from there, to develop it and bring it to a certain form. We need to stabilize ourselves in this way, and then we reach a state that on this human level we will find how successful we are with everything, so that this entire crisis that we're feeling today, it needs to also happen in the entire world. And it's being revealed today. Also here, we will see a concentration of this crisis here. We are able to understand that all of these forces are as the revelation of evil, so that we will rise above it once again. But when we rise above it, it will already happen so that we should draw the entire world towards it with us. To our people, just like the group of Abraham, there is no other destiny or purpose but to serve others. And we are now, just as all the other Babylonians that dispersed so much and multiplied, they are all going to need to join the same method. Not by force and not by any sort of condescendence, but we must realize this. And therefore, we actually have nothing to do but advertise and disseminate the method. I'd like to ask here, many people who complete their army service, they pack a bag and they leave. They go to the Far East, to South America, all kinds of countries all over the globe, and search search for something, each one with his own search. And during these searches, we get to know all kinds of cultures, all kinds of philosophies, all kinds of approaches to life that we don't see in Israel these days. And many times we feel that there's something magical and good about them, that we'd be very glad if motives from them would also have part in our lives here in Israel, because our lives would be much better. And when they come back with their big bags back to Israel, they come back and enter their bourgeois life once again, and all their dreams and great ideas disappear. And then over their life, in all kinds of different situations, they take a little trip again, maybe a little search where they maybe want to take a trip abroad or stay in Israel and learn something. There's a kind of pepper that spices up Israelis and inspires them to go and search something outside of Israel. Because what they find here is not satisfactory. I can say, as an average Israeli, if 20 years ago, I wouldn't tell you that my life would look the way it does now. This is not what I wanted. And this dream for a new society is something that people feel depressed about because they repress it within themselves. But when you go on a journey, you take your bags and you go and find and meet a new culture, a new ideology, a new philosophy that we don't know, it appeals to us. So we'd like to go on a trip and find something in our own past. Maybe in our past, our nation lived in a better way than it did today, to learn from this journey and to come back with a kind of feeling of what it is that we need to do now, because there's a desire for change, but it's not clear to us what it is that we need to do. There's a very big desire to create something new. This something new can be made in USA, made in India, made in here or there. This is what we do. We search all kinds of formats and feel this will be good for me, what happens in Scandinavia will be good for me, or what happens in the Far East will be good for me, each one with what he connects to. The question is there something in our history, is there a root that is good and right for us that we should realize here in Israel tomorrow? If we do, then let's go back in time to that place. We did this already with Abraham. We felt something new, a kind of atmosphere that gives us vision. But is there another place in our history that we should zoom into in order to learn how we should organize our people here? Do you recognize such a place or period in the history of our people? But this was thousands of years ago. Who can even understand anything from such a state? Who can feel it? It's written that from Dan to Beersheba, everyone was united. Everyone knew. Even the youngest children got educated to unity and love. This was the force of bestowal that was active, that was opened up inside the people. Everybody was united so especially, and it was a time that the people had. And then later the egoistic desire grew again, and then they rose above it again, and then again they had an egoistic period, and again they rose above it. Because all in all, we need to discover all the ego of human nature, all the hatred, all the repulsion, and over it, each time, each one, and all of us together must bring this force of bestowal to dominate over this force of reception. And so we had these different periods, and this also happens every day within one person. This is a dynamic state. It's not that something is over until we correct all of our nature. Today, it's much easier for us to correct it because we see that the ego itself points towards itself and says it's not able to bring us anything good. You will not receive any satisfaction through your ego. You'll not receive any feeling of life, of full life. You can go all over the world, but still you come back empty. Maybe for a moment you are inspired Let's say when I go and visit my relatives in Canada, I have dozens of relatives there. I look at them. I can't live like them. It's death. They live, they go to work, they come back from work, again, this and that. The children are this way or that. Inside, they're empty. Once or twice a year, they go maybe to the Dominican Republic for some vacation where it's cheap, and they come back to the same life. I can't do that. They feel that they're empty, but they create such an environment around them that it's okay. The fact that I exist in this way, it's all true and good. So we live. This is the life. We live this way, we die this way. And in between, I need to suffer as least as possible, and that's my goal. There are some people who are able to wire themselves in this way, to agree to it, and some people are not able to. I, for example, am not able to. If you take me there, it's like to a cemetery. I will not agree to it, even though I'll have everything I need there, materially speaking. But all my relatives are there, but I can't. Also, in the United States, I can't nowhere. Why? Because certain people have a certain inclination to live in Israel. So then you're saying it won't help us if we build Canada or the United States here in Israel, socially speaking. No. Also, you can see in the United States that the dream, the material, consumerist, bourgeois dream is over. Okay, so we're looking for this new dream. That's what we're trying to do in this journey, this old and new dream. The new dream is the inner fulfillment. It doesn't matter how many cars you have at home or how many stories in your house. This is already the past. In the past, a person is beginning to discover, what about me? What do I have inside? Am I full or not? No. I have so much stuff. What if I build around me? It's like a palace. So what? What do I have next? I do not have any fulfillment from this. You understand? This will to receive in us, when it develops in a qualitative way. There are certain periods that it develops in a in terms of quantity, where I want more stuff, more quality stuff, bigger cars, more stronger car, and so on and so forth. Later, this doesn't fulfill me anymore. It doesn't. So maybe I'll manufacture something or make something more. But later, after I manufacture all these games and toys around me, finally I feel that I'm empty on the inside. So how do I fulfill myself on the inside? And there is no answer to this. So this is why the world is descending into depression and war and drugs and suicide. And so on this developmental timeline, where do you see the Israeli society? Do you think we've gone past this state of having 2 cars in a house? I'm not so sure. By what I see from the street, I see that this is a very stubborn nation. What do you mean? If I have nowhere to live, of course I want a place to live, and of course I want a car if I don't have one. But they need to understand. Talk to us. We're the people. Let's say I have a minus in the bank. You won't be able to attain any of the things that you want. I'm willing to sign it. You won't be able to reach the just division of goods, not the right supplies, not cheap housing for young people, not just taxation. Security, of course, does not depend on us. It's above us. Also, the economy doesn't depend on us. We depend on the entire world. We need to reach all of these things only if we stir within ourselves the same roots that we have before and realize them, and by that give an example to the entire world. By that, we neutralize all our hatred, all the anti-Semitism. We draw all the people to the same form without advertising, just by giving an example of what's happening to us here. And to realize this example, it doesn't cost a thing. We don't depend on anyone there. When it comes to this, we depend on no one. It only depends on the relationships between us. And we have, for this, as opposed to all the other nations, we have the right approach and the sources and this internal gene of that same level that belongs to the human level, which does not exist in any other nation, only in this group of Abraham, which we are a result from. You have no other solution to the general crisis, the world and Israeli crisis, and anything. Only this. If not connection, if not unity in order to discover ourselves completely soaked in this force of mutual bestowal in which we discover this new life, that between us we should feel hatred and love, and hatred again and love again, in this desire to unite together and to connect. If we don't follow through with that, we will feel the crisis in a very, very grave way. The crisis on the animal level, just like with the rest of the world. And with us, we understand what this can reach, these negative forces that are about to eat us up here from all sides. So we need to explain this to the people. We talk to us. We are the people. Tell us what to do. On this trip, I personally wanted to reach Egypt because I wanted to understand what happened to us there as a society. I identify very much today with this feeling of the modern slavery. So what, you think that happened in Egypt? I don't know. Let's try and see what happened there to our society, the Israeli society that Abraham built, this group of people. What happened to it when it went to Egypt? This is called descending to Egypt, just like now that the ego controls. That's called descending to Egypt. Right now, I'm under the control, the domination of Pharaoh that controls me, that doesn't allow me to unite with others, that I want to. But nothing comes out of it, the opposite. The more I act for the sake of unity, it's all swallowed by the ego and it gains by it. As much as we united all over the world, the only people who gain from it are those who take from us everything, who sell us all these nonsense just to make money, who create slaves out of us. And so that is Egypt. There is no other Egypt. What is the next station after Egypt? If in Egypt, I look at this society because to me it's interesting to look at the societal processes that happen. So I understand that this unity in Egypt is something we weren't able to maintain. Otherwise, we wouldn't feel what you're describing now. And then what happened? We divided again. This force split us up again. Egypt is the state in which the ego controls us. And in accordance to this social process, it means that we've split up. But Egypt means that I head towards connection, and even though I do so, the ego is above me and begins to control me. And then I feel the hatred and this bad way that we treat each other. That is called Egypt, on the condition that we want to unite, and then the ego splits us up, and this is called Egypt. And then I feel this force that is called Pharaoh, this power as a hater, and then I must run away from it. And if I work on the connection and I feel this power that separates us, this is called Egypt. We still do not discover it. When we begin to unite, then we will also begin to discover these opposite forces. And once again, we will connect. And once again, we will discover these opposing forces. And then there is a method here that shows us that we need to rise above the ego more and more and more until we reach a level that we're completely above it. and we can rule it, we can control it. If you could draw me a picture so that I'll be able to understand the interactions between people that happen within this Egyptian society, what is happening in Egypt? Meaning the Israeli society in that time of Egypt. The Israeli society in Egypt, to begin with, we are in this direction of unity. We are the group of Abraham that goes into Egypt, but the ego begins to be revealed more and more and more. And we try and are able to be above this ego, to control it, until it grows to such an extent that I am not able to control it anymore. It begins to split us apart, to distance us. And then I have no choice. If I continue to desire to be together, I see that I have to escape from it. I have to rise above this ego, above this desire to receive, and to unite. And so it turns out that we escape from the ego and reach in this direction of unity to the standing of the Sinai mountain. This is where we do the unity. So then our ego that's grown in Egypt is the one that brings us to this first point of unity that is called the event of the Sinai mountain. So as of today, we don't really need to go through all these conditions because we've already gone through them. Today, we have to perform this final correction as an Israeli society, and the world will join us without a problem. It doesn't need to go through all these things. But what we need is to push ourselves towards connection on all levels, on all the different possibilities and opportunities, and to bring this method to the nation as the method of life. What will come of it? We won't go through all the years of bounty and famine and blessings and poverty. All these things will happen very quickly within us in a very tight way. We've already experienced this, we've already been there. And so there's only one blow, I would say, that we need to go through of unity. If we push the people there, we'll succeed. And aside from that, well, after that, we're already reaching the correction of the world. So a journey to Egypt is good in order to see the process that we constantly need to rise above our will to receive. And every day in Egypt is a struggle to be above the ego constantly. And until they reach, meaning in our past, in our previous incarnations, we arrived at the plagues of Egypt. The ego grew, Pharaoh grew, and we grew. And the Pharaoh grew again, and we grew. The force of bestowal and the force of reception, the force of separation, the force of connection. And this is revealed more and more until it reaches the whole amount, complete amount, and then we leave Egypt. The ego remains below it. We don't enliven it anymore. It doesn't control us anymore, and we're able to unite. And then when we unite, we correct it. We add it to us. We cannot continue without it, but it's already in a balanced way. So it's the same things, but this will happen very swiftly. Connecting over a very short time that we also need to go through now, even though we have all this distancing between us and hatred and lack of understanding. And we see that the society is split up into so many parts that are foreign and strange, and there's disrespect between all the parts. we need to acknowledge that this is our Pharaoh, this is the force, the evil force within us. And above it, we need not to erase it, but above it, to begin to get to know this and build this system of unity. So if I look at Israeli society for a moment and how it is in this height of separation and lack of connection, what do I need to do in order to begin to connect these pieces? So first of all, I begin to understand from this story, this is the story of our life, of Israel. We would always connect and separate and connect and separate. There are a lot of more examples of this in history. And now we're looking at the height of separation. So what can I take from this journey that I took in to learn about the state I find myself in now? Well, you need to build a system of advocacy and to explain and to teach the people, just like Abraham did, and bring people to the understanding this is the only thing that can save us. And actually, there's nothing else. And this system is not just advocacy; it's education. It's a system that takes everyone and begins to change society, the atmosphere, the connection between people. It's a system that takes the entire nation, wraps it up, and treats everything that's necessary to treat in the nation. It has to be higher than everybody else. It needs to take care of all the things that happen inside. This is what we need. Until it will be everybody's, it belong to everyone. Without it, we won't succeed. Well, okay, on this journey, there's so many more stations. For example, one of the significant stations, according to history, is that we went into exile. What can I learn from this period, from the development of religions as well? Is there a process here? Up until that moment, we were in Egypt. There weren't religions at all. Yes, but that's not important. All the religions and faiths in the world all remain. Also, we see what the Kabbalists write about. It doesn't just bother anyone as long as they connect above it. Each one can stay with their same character, with their religion. I don't feel a problem in connecting to another if we also connect above these differences. If we clear the hatred from all of our relationships, if we build the relationships between us in connection, then let there be religions, let there be faiths, let there be all kinds of traditions, different mentalities. So what? It actually doesn't interfere. But to create this system that will take care of all of Israel, that will convince him that there's no other choice, that this is the only way we can reach this salvation, success, the fulfillment of the purpose of the human existence, that there's no other choice. We need to reach connection as our desired outcome, and not that nature should push us there. Just like the crisis is beginning to reveal to us now. Today, with the crisis, many people in the world already understand that there is no other choice but to correct the person, to correct the connection, the relationships between people. They already understand that the way the society was before is it's heading towards bankruptcy. It's going to break down. And even though many people still are holding on to it because they don't see any other way, they think it will come back, they think things will be okay. This is not what will happen. And from day to day, more and more people understand this, that here, significant change is taking place. And so we need to bring the medicine before we feel the blow, before the illness is discovered. And this crisis here compels us with more and more difficult plagues or blows, and so let's understand it, let's work with it, accept it before these blows come to shake us up. Let's discover them in advance. These blows are enough. We can already identify what will happen ahead. Well, you spoke before about how until Israel do not connect to their roots, we won't be able to build a corrected Israeli society or a corrected society at all. So, if we take a look at our past, what can you see in the history of this nation and identify as our original code that we can take as a compass to building a new society in Israel? Before we were dispersed into the last exile, we were just one nation. There were a lot of problems. Sometimes we would overcome them, but always we somehow maintained the notion that unity is the upper force that controls society. This is what was up until 2,000 years ago, the last exile, when the last exile began, when Rabbi Akiva talked about love thy friend as thyself, and taught that we must maintain it, but we weren't able to. We don't have another law in nature that we can bring instead of it. We need, nonetheless, to bring this method as an educational method to each and every one, not just for kids, but to everyone. And to begin according to that, to see ourselves, meaning in all the media channels and the way we behave, everywhere we go, we have to work with this as the thing that will save us, that saves us from actual death, from this terrible state. If society will acknowledge this, the method of connection, as the only salvation, we will succeed. Well, when you talk about education, and usually as a father to children, I can say that usually people think that education has to do with children, schools, but you're talking about a process that everybody needs to go through here in our society. So this word education kind of raises questions in me, and even I don't like it. What, will somebody come and educate me? What, I'm not educated? Of course, why not? Why not? Because I finished school a few years ago already. Oh, well, what do you even remember from school? We understand that school doesn't educate you. It only gives you knowledge and not education, and we need to separate the two. It's only called the Ministry of Education, but really it's only giving knowledge. And who really leaves school educated? We see that not many, and we see what comes of it. A person goes into school for 10 to 12 years, and what comes out of him? It comes on the one hand and comes out the next, and there's no memory even of trace of education. And we're talking about education towards connection, and we see none of that. He doesn't even receive strengthening from that, not from home, not from the streets, from the society, from nowhere. It has to be the air. The air has to hold this scent of connection in it everywhere. What do you mean an air of connection? That without connection we cannot do it. That without yearning for connection in every moment, we descend to destruction. What do you mean everywhere? Do you mean air? I understood it on the level of the message, but I mean the mutual societal support, that everybody should understand it and feel it and know it, that everyone will study it in factories, in offices, in schools, of course, through television, through the radio, through all kinds of such mechanisms, that everyone will understand that this is it. If we are just like we were in Masada, then we have to. This is our weapon. We must, in our situation, think only of connection. It's kind of like a self-brainwash that society is doing to herself. Yes, and begins to operate in accordance to that. It's a practical brainwash where you need to realize it in life as well. The end to all kinds of competitions, except for a competition in unity. All the rest of the competitions are egoistic competitions. Only by that does each one show himself to others. If I don't show myself as willing to head towards this connection, I am ashamed of that. If I don't bestow to others, if I don't also influence myself to be more friendly towards others, I feel myself as bad, disgraced. This needs to be the public opinion. This is what we need. Without it, we won't be able to be saved at all. It will be the end of the state. Why? Because it won't be able to exist over time without self-fulfillment, self-actualization, and its actualization is only through the force of connection that we shall build here the people of Israel. Why? Because the people of Israel only exist to begin with through connection. And now it only exists here through this force of egoism for just a small time as an opportunity to begin to unite. There is no people of Israel without connection. It's exile once again. And so for now we are here as this meeting of exiles. As this gathering of the exiles, and as much as we'll be able to do so, to connect, we'll succeed. If not, we'll be dispersed once again. Well, when you said that this gathering of exiles, it became so clear how we live in the same territory. The picture is so clear now. It's just like you told us about the group that didn't follow Abraham, that each one took his direction and they lived in different groups. Each one also wants to leave. You see that. I don't think there are many Israelis that are willing to stay here. If there was an opportunity, yes, lots of Jews would leave. Give people the money and passport, they'll be happy to leave. All right, so today, living in Israel, we're living in one territory that we define as the state of Israel. It still doesn't mean that we're living here as an Israeli society. Of course, because to live as an Israeli society means to be connected. Yes. So right now, if I'm coming back from this journey with impressions, because I went out on this journey to discover and identify something about my identity as an Israeli, something I'll be able to bring home. What am I coming home with? What is this Israeli identity? It's a collection of cultures from all different countries, impressions of the entire world, with the addition of the Israeli culture, the lowly one that we see today on television, that is the people is fed with all kinds of things, all the arguments in the government that is completely opposite of the example that they need to give. They should be giving the opposite of the example that people should be receiving. And that's it. This is Israel. Just as we heard that, all in all, we're just a sack of nuts. Only the sack. Out of no choice, because of the general state of anti-Semitism, the hatred from our neighbors. This is all that keeps us together. Alone, nothing except for that. if there weren't these external conditions, we would disperse immediately, just like those gnats that fall out of the bag. We would have no choice to stay together, no choice, for certain. The example is very clear. So what is the difference between Israeli and Jewish? Because when we were one group, we were called Israel. And then when we were dispersed, we were Jewish. Also today we're called Israeli. So what? I'm trying to understand the difference for a moment, because there was a group of Israel with Abraham. And then when we went abroad, we weren't called Israel anymore. We were called Jews. And then we came back to a state that is called the state of Israel. Jewish is one who belongs to unity, who wants to belong to unity. So a Jew is something that has something on him out of Israel? Okay, so then we were Israel, we became supposedly Jewish, and now we're trying to rebuild this Israeli society? Yes. Wait a minute, I'm a little confused. We're about to end the talk, but still I'd like to ask, what is this Israeli identity that I can take from me from this journey? And I feel that you gave a picture of our current Israeli identity that is really does not make anyone happy. So we didn't hear the answer to this question. When we summarize this journey into the past, that you began with Abraham and all kinds of stations over history, what can I bring with me in my pack that I could say, this is my original route. Let's take our original route, put us between us, for it to be the compass for us in building this new Israeli society, and then we'll know that we will succeed for sure. What is the root of this new construction? What is the root that we can say, this is the original Israeli, the social root of Israel? Connection above all separations, above everything, above the parties, above all kinds of secular and religious parties, whatever you want. Connection above everyone. Bestowal, mutual bestowal. To acknowledge that we are all different, but just like in a family, that we are brothers, that we don't want any bad to happen to anybody, that this good is something I'll feel in connection with everyone and not in me. That we shall build a society where only in the connection between us in this common field, just like we're sitting now at this table, here between us, we want this goodness to be revealed. This is all that I think about, only what is common and shared by all of us. There can be parties, there can be opinions, all kinds of different tastes and mentalities. Everything can stay, but there needs to be an addition and a benefit from this to everyone. And what does not benefit everyone, I erase, I restrict. I don't want to take it into consideration. That is Pharaoh. What does it mean that I take vessels from Egypt? I take what I can take for the sake of connection. I can take it from my ego. The rest I leave behind. I don't work with them. That is the approach. So for this, we need a general consensus, the public opinion. The question is, when will it be able to agree with it? Only when we find ourselves in a Holocaust, or can it be before such a thing? That is the question. And even then, they will not listen. So we need to work with force, with energy, with determination, even aggressiveness, to bring this message to the nation that this all needs to happen now, before we reach these very difficult states. So should we end with this note, or would you like to add anything else to finish? Well, I'd like to add that according to the general development of what we see in the nation and in the people, I'm very optimistic despite all of it. And we have First of all, to unify our own group that sanctifies the method of Abraham and desires for everyone to know it. I think that we will succeed, we will win, and we will have the strength to lead Israel and the entire world to this form that Abraham wanted to do thousands of years ago in Babylon. Thank you very, very much, Rav Laitman. Thank you, Nitza Mazoz. Thank you for coming with us on this journey. Until next time, let's connect to this new life. All the best.